The alarm screams. 5:47, July. A cold floor, a dark room, and Danny already knows nobody films this, nobody clips this, nobody ever will. She laces up anyway. By the end of this story, you'll understand something most people never figure out. The bottom of the table doesn't tell you where a team is going. It tells you where they were before they started the work nobody films. What Danny did between July and September in the dark, with no cameras and no audience, didn't just save her season. It rewrote the entire ladder. And the coach who made it happen, he built his hardest sessions for the days the press didn't show up. On purpose. Here's why. Danny was 20 and already used to the word no. She trialed at 3 bigger clubs before she turned 19, walked into pristine academies with polished floors, and walked out of all 3 with a handshake and silence. The kind of silence that means you're not enough. Too small, they wrote in one report. Limited ceiling, said another. She landed at a club that couldn't afford better, a squad so far down the standings they were a punchline on the weekend highlight reel. Nobody expected anything from this team. Nobody was protecting their reputation. And that, it turned out, was the only advantage that mattered. I got to the training ground at 6:15 every morning, before the floodlights, before the groundskeeper. The grass was stiff with frost, and my breath came out in clouds that vanished before they hit the crossbar. I ran drills alone in the half-dark, cone work, first touch, sprint recoveries on a pitch so waterlogged my boots sank at every turn. There was nobody to impress. The press doesn't cover bottom-table clubs in the off-season. I trained because something in my chest understood a truth most people spend their whole career avoiding. The work you do when nobody's watching is the only work that's real. There was nothing cinematic about it. No montage music. No crowd noise piped through speakers. Just the sound of boots hitting wet turf and a phone propped against a water bottle, filming her footwork so she could watch it back on the bus home. She'd pause, rewind, and wince at her own mistakes, then come back the next morning and fix exactly what she saw. Cone by cone, rep by rep. A woman in a faded Navy kit doing invisible work on a pitch that smelled like mud and diesel from the car park. And doing every rep as if the stadium was full and the lights were on. The coach was a man named Sefton, late 50s. Stocky build, weathered face mapped with lines from decades of touchline weather. Silver hair cropped close. A dark green waterproof jacket he never seemed to take off, and a clipboard he carried like a loaded weapon. He built squads at 3 clubs before this one, each time from the bottom, each time with players the bigger clubs had discarded. He spoke less than any coach Danny had ever known. He watched, he scribbled, and when he did open his mouth, every word landed like a stone dropped into still water, because he'd earned the right to silence. After a session so brutal my legs buckled walking to the changing room, Sefton stopped me at the door. He didn't congratulate me, didn't say well done. He looked at me with eyes that had watched 1,000 players arrive full of promise and leave full of excuses, and he said, "You train like you're watched." I didn't know how to take it. He let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then, that's the rarest thing in this sport. Most people rehearse intensity. You just have it. Don't ever let comfort take it from you. What Danny didn't know, what none of the players knew, was that Sefton designed his most punishing sessions for the days when the media weren't scheduled to visit. Deliberately. Every Monday he'd check the press calendar, and he'd stack the heaviest physical and tactical work into the gaps where no journalist, no photographer, no camera would be present. His logic was as cold as the July wind. If a player performs only when they're observed, you haven't built a player, you've built an act. And acts collapse the moment the stage gets real. Sefton wasn't building performances. He was building character in the dark. Pause, I want you to think about something. When was the last time you did something genuinely hard, physically, mentally, creatively, when you knew nobody would ever see the result? No post, no story, no one to tell at dinner, just you and the effort. How hard did you go? Because here's what 20 years of watching people build themselves has taught me. The version of you that shows up in the empty room is the version that decides everything. Not the one who performs at the interview. Not the one who grinds when the boss is watching. The one who works when the room is dark and the door is closed. That's the audit. Everything else is theater. And this isn't just philosophy, the research backs it up. Studies on deliberate practice in elite athletes have consistently found that the quality of training done for its own sake, the sessions focused on precise improvement rather than performance, reputation, or external reward, predicts long-term excellence more powerfully than the results those athletes produce in early competition. Let that land for a moment. The invisible work is the actual predictor. The matches, the games, the competitions everyone tunes in to watch, those are just the reveal. The score was already decided in the sessions nobody saw. Danny didn't know this research existed. She didn't need to. She was living it. August came. Pre-season friendlies began and nothing looked different from the outside. The pundits still ranked them dead last. A local newspaper ran a season preview that mentioned Danny's club in a single paragraph. A young squad with limited depth and no realistic path to mid-table. They didn't print her name. Sefton found that article, tore it out carefully along the fold, and pinned it to the dressing room wall. He didn't circle anything, didn't write a motivational slogan above it. He just placed it there, next to the fixture list, and left the room. The silence said everything the words didn't. The season opened with 2 losses. The first wasn't close, 3-0, and the other side barely tried. The second was worse. We led by 1 goal in the 78th minute. I could taste it, our first points right there. Then 2 goals in stoppage time and the final whistle hit like a door slamming. I sat in the changing room with my boots still on, mud drying on my shins, staring at the tile floor. That old silence was creeping back in, the silence I'd heard at every trial, the one that means not enough. And I thought maybe they were right. Maybe the table doesn't lie. Maybe July was just July. Sefton walked in. He didn't console anyone, didn't clap his hands or give a speech about character. He stood at the front of the room, arms folded across that green jacket, clipboard nowhere in sight, and said one sentence. If you only perform when you're winning, you're not building a player, you're building a performance, and performances end. Then he turned and walked out. The door closed behind him. The room was silent. I looked up from the floor, and right there in that silence, in that awful, cold, empty room, I made the choice. Not to hope. Hope is cheap. To trust. Trust the invisible work. Trust July. The results hadn't arrived yet, but the foundation was already poured, and I was not going to abandon it because the scoreboard hadn't caught up. That choice cost something. It would have been easier to disengage, to protect herself the way every overlooked athlete learns to, by caring a little less so the losses cut a little softer. But Danny chose to stay all in, to keep arriving at 5:47, to keep training at full intensity on a pitch nobody was watching, for a club nobody believed in, after losses that confirmed every doubt. She chose the harder pain, the pain of investing completely in something that might still fail. Week 3. They won by a single goal, a scrappy, ugly, beautiful goal from a set piece they drilled 200 times on frozen grass in July. Nobody outside the club noticed. But inside that changing room, something shifted in the air like a crack in a dam. Week 4 they drew against the club sitting third, a result nobody predicted. Week 5 they won again, then again. The standings started shifting like tectonic plates, slow at first, then sudden, as if the table itself was surprised. By mid-season, the club no one believed in sat in the top half. And that's when the journalists arrived. They came looking for the secret, the new tactical system, the transfer nobody had reported, the sports psychologist, the innovation. Sefton gave every reporter the same answer, word for word. No secret. We just trained in July. They printed it as a quirky soundbite. They didn't understand he meant it literally. Every syllable. Somewhere around the 3rd win in a row, I stopped looking at the table. I hadn't noticed the exact moment it happened, but the anxiety was gone, that constant checking, that hunger for external proof. I started looking across the pitch instead, with a calm I hadn't earned in any match. I'd earned it at 5:47, on frozen grass. In sessions nobody filmed. The girl every bigger club had overlooked wasn't trying to prove them wrong anymore. I'd moved past that. Proving people wrong is still about them. I was just playing. For the first time in my life, I was just playing. and it was the most powerful feeling I've ever had on a football pitch. So the next time your alarm goes off before the sun and you're lying in the dark and nobody will know if you stayed under the covers, remember Danny. Remember that the bottom of the table doesn't tell you where someone is going. It tells you where they were before the invisible work began. The scoreboard, the promotion, the results everyone sees, those are just the audit. The real score was already written. In the cold, in the quiet, in the reps nobody counted on a pitch nobody was filming. That's where seasons are won. That's where people are built. If you're grinding through something right now that nobody sees, a business nobody believes in, a body that isn't there yet, a skill you practice in a room by yourself, this one was for you. The work nobody films is the work that wins. The dark keeps score. Tomorrow, the founder who rebuilt everything from one phone call in a parking lot. I'm Cole. Subscribe, a new story like this every evening.